Hey everybody, welcome back to the second Hot Cakes and Hot Reads for William Jean's Memorial Library. I am Adam Gilbert Cole. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at William Jean's Memorial Library. Today we are going to be making pancakes and talking about books yet again. Thanks, as always, to our patron John Lewis for the suggestion of the format for our program today. So we're going to be talking about books today. Some of them are available from our downloadable digital ebooks and audiobooks. You can find all of that in the Libby app on your tablet or smartphone's app store. Some of them that I will talk about are not available there, and so just add them to your to-read pile for that magical moment when the library reopens and we can start lending books again. So last time we made a sort of exotic pancake, exotic to my white bread tastes, I guess. But we had some lemon zest and some ricotta thrown into a very light and fluffy pancake. This time we're making something that's a little more traditional. Still a favorite in the Gilbert Cole household. It's traditional, it's dense, it's definitely ready for some honey or syrup or something sweet. Because of the ingredients, it tends to come out tasting a little salty, so slather some butter on, pour some syrup, some honey, whatever your favorite sweet topping is. It does take fruit really well too. So, okay, so the recipe is actually from the Bob's Red Mill brand Scottish oatmeal container. It's not some secret family recipe or anything, so you should be able to find it pretty easily. It takes whole wheat flour or some mix of whole wheat and unbleached white. If you're using all whole wheat, it will sort of get a little drier, and so we may need to add a little buttermilk, which is another one of our ingredients in the pancake later. So whole wheat flour, the Scottish oatmeal. We'll talk about oatmeal and the difference between Scottish and Irish and quick oats and all that later. There is baking powder, baking soda, salt. Those are the things that make it taste a little salty. Melted butter, eggs. That's it. It's very straightforward. So that is where we're going to start. Now I'm going to dump the flour into my giant Pyrex here, and I do it in the Pyrex because then I can just pour it straight on the griddle later instead of into a bowl. And while I'm starting to mix some of these dry ingredients, I'm going to talk about The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. Nguyen, sorry. I always get that mixed up. Okay, so this is a book that was released in the last few years. I can't remember the exact publication date, but when it came out, it swept award categories. It was nominated for everything that it could be nominated for, basically. And so I stayed away from it for a little while until John Lewis, our patron, lent the book to me. And just recently, one of my other book clubs, has read it and discussed it. So I finally dipped my toe in. It is brilliant. It is set in the Vietnam War era in both Vietnam and Southeast Asia and in California. And it stars the narrator. He never gets a name. A lot of the characters in the book are just identified by their role in the book. So the general and his wife are just the general and his wife. Anyway, it stars the narrator, who is, at the beginning of the story, serving in the household for the general and his wife at the end of the Vietnam War. Saigon is about to fall, and it turns out that he's actually this entire time been serving as a spy for the North Vietnamese. The opening line for the book is, "I am a spy, a sleeper, a spook, a man with two faces." I really love that opening sentence. The story itself is really sort of propulsive at times. It's tense and thrilling, but also, there's just weird moments of hilarity. And the narrator, the writing itself is just extraordinary. The sentences, you can hear it in that first sentence. The sentences themselves, even the most mundane descriptions, are just really vibrant. It does have some brutal sections in it. So if you are not a person who enjoys reading, say, how POWs are tortured in camps. Maybe stay away from this book, but I think it's well worth dipping in just for the themes. It really, this is a time that we sort of have a cultural memory of in America, but it definitely takes a different tack. And it does it really well, really beautifully. It centers it on people. It does explore racism in America, and that big battle of ideas, communism, capitalism, that happened, from the 50s all the way through the 80s. So that is The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, winner of the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. It got nominated for the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, all kinds of stuff. Really, really brilliant, and I think that you should check it out. This one is available in Libby, and I don't know if it currently has a holds queue on it, but I would expect that it is not, that you might have to wait for it for a little bit, just because it's been popular forever. Okay, so that's our first book, everybody. Let's take another step. So this is 1 1/4 cups of whole wheat flour. You can use the Bob's Red Mill. This is just Giant brand here at our household. But it will take that much, 1 1/4 cups. And then we have 3/4 of a cup of Scottish oatmeal. So if you are like me, you hear all the different kinds of oatmeal that are out there, and you think, what is the difference? Because I had no idea there was such a thing as Scottish oatmeal. You always hear Irish oats and steel cut oats and quick oats and instant oats and all that stuff. So when oats are processed, they go through the dehulling, where the outside is removed and you get that little inner kernel, which is the groat, which makes me say oat groat, which I love. So the groat then goes through a cleaning process, and it gets heated up to, I think it's like 215 degrees Fahrenheit or something, to stabilize the groat. Otherwise, the oils in the groat, it goes rancid really quickly. So that's why we have shelf-stable oatmeal, because they heat it up a little bit. And this is where the oats start to differentiate themselves. Irish oats and steel-cut oats are the same thing. They're just cut with a steel blade. And that way you get, you have to cook it longer, but you get a sort of chewy oatmeal. I do love that texture too, but Scottish oatmeal is my favorite. Instead of cutting it up with a steel blade, they just mill it so that it comes out into a sort of finer texture. And it cooks for about the same amount of time that a steel-cut oat does, but it gets this really creamy texture, like the traditional porridge sense. And that's the difference between Irish and Scottish oats. Your old-fashioned oats are one step further, where they steam the oats. Instead of cutting them or milling them, they steam them and then flatten them. And once they dry again, you have that traditional sort of flat oatmeal flake. And the instant oats are taken one step even further. And they are... I don't remember what happens with the instant oats. I'll have to look that up and get back to you. Anyway, at each step along the process, the oatmeal loses a little bit of its nutritional value. So if you're looking for the actual full nutritional value for your oatmeal, you want to stay with the Irish oats or the Scottish oats. Okay, so I'm going to start throwing this other stuff in while I talk about our next book. I think this book will serve a lot of people in our current condition. It's called How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. Jenny Odell is a professor at Stanford University. She's an artist. She did a talk a few years ago at a conference that sort of was developed into this book. It's a little ironic to be talking about this book on Facebook, where I'm sharing all of my thoughts and feelings, because part of the argument of the book is that, technology and social media are really pulling us in every direction. That's not an uncommon argument these days, but she makes her argument in sort of different ways that a lot of other books attempt. Anyway, as I was saying, I think this is the perfect book for our situation. I don't know if you are feeling like I am, but there is a little bit of like recentering happening inside Adam right now. Before this, I was flung every which way. I am active in my church, and I'm active in other political groups, and I'm active in a club, and I have hobbies, and I need to see my friends, and I've got to, make sure my kids and my wife are okay, and all of that is on top of being a librarian and working. Her argument is that not only are we killing ourselves with the amount of productivity that we are expecting ourselves to do during the day, that all of this outside activity is no longer seen as enrichment. It's seen as self-improvement, which is in itself just a form of productivity. That capitalism has sort of seeped into everything that we do and feel, and that maybe taking a step back provides us the opportunity to do nothing, think deeper, and do it in ways that other people haven't argued yet. So I hear this argument a lot in terms of, say, mental health, your ability to be creative, your ability to, make contact with other people, that sort of thing. Her argument is more on a sort of societal scale. The example that I came across when I was prepping to do our talk today is that in an interview she talks about, she's a bird watcher, she's a bird lover. She would walk across campus and always notice the birds. They would distract her, they'd get her attention. So she just picked a garden to sit and watch the birds. And over time she noticed that birds, the types of birds, the species of birds that were showing up were different. And that sort of stopping, sitting and doing nothing gives us the opportunity to notice those big, longer term changes. Something that may be abstract in our minds, like climate change, becomes something that we can notice when we stop ourselves, sit, do nothing in a park for a while, see the types of birds that are coming and going. Her other main argument is that this kind of productivity, this impulse to always be on and always be working, separates us from each other, and that keeps us from organizing ourselves into those natural groups that are centered on things that we care about. If we are always thinking about working and being better, then it's probably not going to happen that we come together with the people that are trying to rescue dogs. They, put a volunteer group together. Or we're not going to come together and form a group of Spanish-speaking folks who can help new immigrants to our country, that sort of thing. And then that inability to organize into small clusters, to sit and listen to people's concerns, sort of keeps us from being able to take the bigger clusters of people and put them together and sit and listen to concerns. It's a great book, and I can't do it justice in talking about it this way because it is very multifaceted, but I think it's perfect for anybody who is looking to figure out how to incorporate some of the lessons of our current slowed down life into what may come, afterwards. That is How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. That one is not available in Libby, I know for sure. It was published by Melville House, which is sort of a smaller publisher. So, you can request it at the library's website in our catalog. I will say that we were the first library in the McLink network to get it. But almost everybody has a copy of it at this point because it was so popular. All right, so we've got 1.25 cups of whole wheat flour, 3/4 cup of Scottish oatmeal. I'm going to mix in all the other dry ingredients. So a teaspoon of salt. In this case, I ground up some salt in our salt grinder, but you could probably get away with kosher salt or just regular table salt. We have 2 teaspoons of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. It's sticking to my little ramekins here. All right. So those are our dry ingredients mixed together. I'm going to blend them up a little bit so that when we mix the wet stuff in here, it's not going to get clumps of salt and stuff together. All right, so our next book is, I don't know if anybody can see that, Open Borders, The Science and Ethics of Immigration by Bryan Caplan and Zach Weinersmith. So this one is a politically charged book. I just think it's important for folks to know the arguments for or against on either side here. So just be prepared going into it if you're going to read it. Number one, it's a quick read. You can get it done in a few hours. And number two, it has a very specific viewpoint. So whether you agree with it or not, know that you're reading it to sort of understand the arguments that are made from one point of view. Bryan Caplan, the author, the writer of the book, is a noted economist. He teaches at one of the famous universities on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and I can't remember which one right now. But and he is a proponent of open borders. Zach Weinersmith is the author and artist of a very hilarious webcomic called Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal that jokes a lot about science and science-related things, and so the pairing here kind of makes sense. They're putting their expertise together to make an argument. So the book, exactly as it says in its title, is making the case for open borders, not just in the United States, but internationally. That sort of unrestricted immigration between countries should be a natural right of a human being, and the book does a pretty good job of laying out its arguments. Not only dealing with the data that it's using to back up its argument, but also, this is an argument that is very driven by emotion for a lot of people too, and it does its job in dealing with people's emotional arguments about this also. I appreciated that it was also very funny at times, mostly I think from Zach Weinersmith's interjections to sort of lighten the mood. Because it is, it's one of those things that you never know where a person falls on the spectrum. Anyway, it is worth reading just for understanding Bryan Caplan's argument. He comes from like an unrestricted sort of libertarian point of view, if that makes sense, and so I highly recommend it. It comes with a nice chapter of notes at the end to give you sources to go into, citing all the statistics that they're using. It's well researched, well written, funny, and well drawn. I kind of love it, so give it a try. That one too is not available in our downloadable collection, but you can again request it at the library's catalog and wait for it to come around. All right, so I'm going to turn the griddle on because I'm about to mix the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. The next step. Okay, so I've got a 1/4 cup of melted butter here that's going to go in. You know what? I'm going to mix that with the other stuff because we're going to try to mix it all together. So that 1/4 cup of butter I'm mixing in with a 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Buttermilk is one of those things that I never really understood what it was until, again, preparing for this. You think like, oh, thick milk. The traditional buttermilk, before we started processing milk with centrifuges, buttermilk was the layer of milk that was underneath, left over after the milk naturally separated into the fatty, creamy layer that people were going to use to make butter with. The buttermilk is the stuff at the bottom. And because it's full of bacteria and stuff like that, the longer it sits, the sort of tangier it gets and the thicker it gets. So that's natural buttermilk. Since about the late 1800s, I guess, when we started producing milk commercially with centrifuges, we don't really get that kind, and butter, commercially with centrifuges, we don't get that process of milk sitting out anymore, the leftover milk sitting out. So the buttermilk that you find in the stores these days is actually just cultured milk, which is a similar step to yogurt. It still gives the same end product where it's tangy and thick and tastes good, but it's not historically the same as the buttermilk. people do say that you can try making buttermilk. You know, if you don't have any at home, you can just add a sort of acid to milk and let it thicken, vinegar or something like that. But it doesn't ever quite get as thick as the cultured stuff that you get from the store. So if you can get it ahead of time, get it ahead of time. All right, and then we have 2 eggs that are going into this mixture too. So we have 1.5 cups of buttermilk, 1/4 cup of melted butter, 2 eggs. Thank you to my good friend for the eggs from her chickens. Springtime came and her chickens started laying eggs like crazy, and so about every week I go over to her porch and pick up a socially distanced dozen eggs. But the shells are very thick on fresh eggs. Okay, so now we're going to blend all this together so that it's all whipped up. Got to make sure the eggs are beaten before we put it in. And then mix them together. Easy peasy. All right, and I'm just gonna mix this up with my spatula. So like I said at the beginning, if you are using whole wheat flour for this, it may get drier than if you're using white flour. The whole wheat flour tends to soak up moisture a little more. And so the recipe says, you know, approximately 1.5 cups of buttermilk. You may need more if your batter gets too thick. This is actually looking pretty good. But my next step is to let it sit for a minute. I like to let the oatmeal sort of have a chance to absorb some of the liquid. And so I'm going to let it sit and see if I need to put more buttermilk in just a second. In fact, I can see that it's already getting thicker. Mostly because I missed a pocket of flour in the bottom there as I was mixing. All right, so my next book is a book recommendation from Adam to all the weirdos out there who like strange books that they don't understand and will never understand. You may have gotten a sense of me as a reader over the past couple sessions here, but so I'm a big lover of science fiction and fantasy, but I do also love, you know, experimental literature, stuff that is shooting for the moon and maybe getting it and maybe not. This one is a sort of classic. They call it a classic of speculative fiction. And it's one of those books that does not have a middle ground from anybody that I've ever talked to. It is either a book that you feel and relate to, or a book that you read the first 12 pages and set aside. You can't, you know, and some folks try it for longer and end up hating it and throwing it across the room. But this is Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delany. Delany is, good morning everyone, I see all your comments. Delany is a science fiction writer. He's published sort of classic science fiction stuff that we think of this, you know, like spaceships and stuff like that. But this, I think, is probably his most famous book. It's been republished a few times since it was released in '75, and between the editions, it sold over 1 million copies at this point. Everyone that writes online asks why it sold over 1 million copies. But, oh, my griddle is getting hot, everybody. You can see the steam coming off of it. So this book it's speculative fiction, which is a term that we use for like an overarching genre of fantasy, science fiction, horror, that sort of thing. And because it's called speculative fiction, because it doesn't really have any of the classic tropes of science fiction, fantasy. It might have some horror stuff in there, but it is set in Bologna, which is a Midwestern American city, you know, a made-up Midwestern American city that suffered some kind of catastrophe, never really explained or explored. The city used to have 2 million people in it and now has about 1,000. The book is really, really recursive. You have conversations that happen on one page, and then 30 pages later, the conversation happens again from a different perspective and ends up coming out differently. The writing itself is very experimental. It is so the introduction to this edition is written by one of my other favorite speculative fiction authors, William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer and is sort of the father of cyberpunk. And he calls the book a puzzle that can't be solved. The book owes a lot to sort of the experimental writing of Joyce and Virginia Woolf and stuff like that, only it attempts to build out a much bigger idea of American culture, sexuality, race, all kinds of big things that never really reach a conclusion. And so if you're the type of person that needs a book to get to a point, this might not be your book. But if you're a person who really likes to read just for the exploration of words and ideas, and maybe you don't care too much about understanding the characters, or if characters' names shift over the course of the book, or you don't know who this person is, this might be the book for you. One of the reasons I love this book is that there's a character in it. He's a poet from New Zealand, in the middle of America, named Ernest. Yep, okay, my batter is very thick all of a sudden, so I'm going to add a little more buttermilk to it. His name is Ernest Newboy, and he's from New Zealand. He's a poet. And he says that there's no reason why all art should appeal to all people, which is one of the guiding principles when I pick up a movie or a book or something like that these days. I think that for a long time, people were expected to love art, everything, I think a few years ago, I was reading a blog, and I can't remember whose it was at this point. I will come up with it, I'm sure, as soon as we're done our event here. But, he was saying that his favorite response when someone tells him about this movie they loved, or this TV series they loved, or this book that they loved, and they say, read it, or watch it, and he does, and he doesn't really like it, that his response is always, it probably wasn't for me. I'm really glad it was for you. And I think that's a really generous way of approaching art making, art consumption. Not everything is going to touch you. Not everything is going to tweak your brain or your heart or whatever. But not everything is made for you either. So it's okay to not like something as long as we're not, putting other people down for enjoying it. Which not a lot of people are going to like Dahlgren, I'm just saying. Okay, I've got my batter, which is lovely and not terribly thick, but just enough. And I've got a hot griddle, and I'm going to pour myself a pancake. All right, everybody, so that is my round of books today. I will be posting the book titles and the recipe for the pancakes on Facebook in the comments below the event here and on our website, jeanslibrary.org. Man, these things look great. So you can find the recipe there. You can find the books there. Please feel free to leave comments in the Facebook event here with questions about anything you have. If you want suggestions for books to read right now, I am super happy to provide them. If you are looking for guidance on pancake recipes, I am also super happy to provide them because I love pancakes. And that is our second edition of Hot Cakes and Hot Reads, everybody. I'm going to wait a couple minutes here and flip over one of these pancakes. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.